Have you seen all those pictures of shacks, makeshift kitchens, and helpless people with their pets? Now take a look at this tiny room. Do you know what that is? A low-income dormitory where up to 5 people share the same space. Can you guess which country we're talking about? Spoiler, it's not a country in Africa, and it's not in Latin America either. This is all happening in Luxembourg, one of the richest countries in the world. Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But it's real. Here, almost 1 in 5 people live on the brink of poverty. While the country collects prosperity awards and is home to some of the largest banks in the world, many people can barely pay the rent at the end of the month. How does that happen in a place that swims in cash? Today, Bello Mundo will take you inside this absurd contradiction and reveal a hidden side of Luxembourg like you've never seen before. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Sandwiched between Belgium, France, and Germany, the country is strategically positioned in one of the busiest areas of the continent. It's almost like having the key to Europe's commercial and political gates. And even though it's only 2,500 square kilometers, which is about the size of the city of Houston in Texas, Luxembourg hides an impressive contrast between nature, history, and modernity. In the north, you'll find hills that look like they're straight out of a fairy tale, dense forests and medieval castles that appear on the horizon as if time had stood still. This region is the Oestling, a continuation of the Ardennes, full of trails and landscapes that make you forget your cell phone. Now we move down the map a little and arrive at Gutland, the good land. The name gives it away. It's the south of the country with fertile fields, vineyards, and vibrant cities. This is where things take a different turn. The countryside gives way to modern buildings and the bustle of the capital. Speaking of Luxembourg, yes, the country and the capital share the same name. It's a real postcard. Imagine a city built on cliffs, with walls and fortifications that seem to shout out stories from centuries past. When it comes to the seasons, each one puts on a different show. Winter brings that classic European charm, with Christmas markets and lights everywhere. In spring, the parks burst into color. Summer is synonymous with open-air festivals, and fall paints the country golden, making the trails and hills even more cinematic. It may be small, but Luxembourg is one of those places that will blow anyone's mind without too much effort. Number 2. History. Luxembourg's history is almost like that of a movie character who starts small, goes through ups and downs, but ends up at the top. It all started back in the 10th century, when a count called Siegfried bought a small castle on top of a hill. This castle, the iconic Bock casemates, was the spark that started what would later become the County of Luxembourg. But the road to independence was long, and like everything else on this small piece of land, full of battles and intrigue. For centuries, Luxembourg was the most coveted prize in Europe. France, Germany, Spain, and Austria. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Its strategic location made it a rare jewel on the European geopolitical chessboard. Whoever controlled Luxembourg basically had a natural fortress in the heart of the continent. But the big turning point came in 1839. After years of disputes and intense negotiations, the Treaty of London finally recognized Luxembourg as an independent state, at least in part. This was because the territory was divided. Half remained with Belgium, and the other half formed the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, an autonomous state but still under the influence of the Netherlands. Full independence only came in 1867, after another crisis, this time involving Prussia and France. The Treaty of London, yes, another one, guaranteed Luxembourg's neutrality, consolidating the country as a sovereign state once and for all. And that's when Luxembourg began to write its own destiny. Number 3. Steel and banking. The country plunged into the steel industry during the 19th century, leaving behind the medieval walls and going headlong into the Industrial Revolution. By the beginning of the 20th century, Luxembourg was among the 6 largest steel producers in the world, exporting up to 90% of its production to build bridges in France and skyscrapers in the United States. But like everything else in life, the steel age began to wane. Demand fell and Luxembourg found itself facing an economic abyss. But Luxembourg is not the type to give up easily. Instead of insisting on an industry that was showing signs of fatigue, the country made the smartest move in its history. It doubled down on the financial sector. And the country's location helped. A lot. Nestled between France and Germany, 2 of Europe's economic powerhouses, Luxembourg took advantage of its close proximity. With stable institutions, a growing economy, and an enviable level of security, the country has become a favorite destination for investors. And of course, a friendly tax system also gave it a boost. Luxembourg practically winked at the world's billionaires and became the darling of the financial sector. Banks, investment funds, holding companies, everything started sprouting up there. Tax rates became so low that the country even rivaled Switzerland as a tax haven. And the figures don't lie. In 2012, bank profits rose 42% in a single year. The country's GDP, driven by the financial sector, soared along with it. The population also got on board. Between 2007 and 2017, Luxembourg saw a 24% increase in its population, something rare in Europe. Today, with around 600,000 inhabitants, the country tops the GDP per capita ranking, with no less than $131,000, according to the International Monetary Fund. What's more, those who live there enjoy the highest minimum wage in the European Union, around €2,500 a month. It's the kind of salary many people dream of. But even with that amount, can you keep up with the pace of life in Luxembourg? Number 4. Poverty. When you think of extreme poverty, the kind that involves hunger and a lack of basic sanitation, Luxembourg seems a long way off. But the reality is that relative poverty and social exclusion are growing problems there. In 2024, statistiques.public.lu, the Luxembourg government's official statistics portal, revealed a figure that took many people by surprise. 20% of the population is at risk of poverty. If we put that into figures, we're talking about 108,000 people living in this situation, in a country with a population of only 600,000. And here's an important detail. Those living on the minimum wage are already part of this group. Statec, the Luxembourg Institute of Statistics, points out that the poverty line in 2024 is €2,247 net per month. This means that anyone earning less than this amount is officially considered to be on a low income. And the problem is that, even earning that much, the bill simply doesn't add up. According to Statec itself, the average cost of maintaining a family in Luxembourg is around €72,000 a year. Divided by 12 months, this gives a monthly cost of €6,014. In other words, even someone earning the minimum wage has to deal with a staggering difference in order to make ends meet. And what are these expenses? Number 5. Housing and food. The biggest villain in Luxembourg's family budget is undoubtedly housing. Rent, water, electricity, and gas account for 36% of all expenses. In real terms, this means around 26,000 euros a year, or 2,178 euros a month. Food also weighs heavily. On average, families spend 6,870 euros a year on food and non-alcoholic drinks. This figure has risen by almost 1,000 euros compared to 2021. And there's more. Clothes and shoes cost around 3,200 euros a year. Education, for those with children, adds another 400 euros a year to the bill. Furniture, home maintenance, and household appliances alone add up to more than 4,200 euros a year. What about leisure? Outings, culture, and that little dinner at the weekend add up to more than 4,000 euros a year. Add it all up, and it's clear that the minimum wage doesn't cover the cost of living in the country. The way out for many families is to share small houses or look for alternatives in neighboring towns, crossing the border into Belgium, France, or Germany every day to work in Luxembourg. Crowded trains, financial stress, and cuts in essential spending have become part of the routine. Some families even skip meals so that their children don't run out of food or school supplies. All this in a country that many call a financial oasis. Now the question arises, who can't afford all this? Number 6. Homeless people. It sounds surreal, but even in one of the richest countries in the world, there are people sleeping on the streets. Yes, homeless people in Luxembourg. Many people have no idea that this reality exists there, but it's much more common than it seems. Remember the video we showed you at the beginning? Those men with the dog camped under a bridge? Well, that scene was recorded in the documentary, Poor and Homeless in a Rich Country, produced by the Franco-German channel RTE. The production begins right in the heart of the capital, under the Grand Duchess Charlotte Bridge. There, for 7 years, 2 people have been living in tents, accompanied by their dogs. And believe me, this is not an isolated case. One of the clearest signs of this growing inequality is the increase in the search for social canteens, places that serve low-cost meals, or the solution is to seek out shelters run by NGOs that distribute soups to those who can't afford them. And anyone who thinks that only homeless people go to these places is mistaken. Number 7. Who are the most affected? The first group to feel the brunt of the cost of living in Luxembourg are foreigners. Almost half of the country's population is made up of immigrants who arrive in search of better salaries and a more stable life. But when they land there, they realize that the reality is much more complicated. The cost of living is high, very high, and even those who have a formal job feel the pinch at the end of the month. Many end up working in sectors that pay little, such as construction, cleaning, and general services. Others, who don't speak Luxembourgish, French, or German, have even fewer options and take what comes their way. It's not uncommon to find reports of immigrant families having to choose between paying the rent or making a decent purchase at the market. Some cut back on meals, others move to neighboring towns in France, Germany, or Belgium, facing crowded trains every day just to make ends meet. And if you think this is limited to foreigners, you're wrong. Single mothers and fathers are among the hardest hit. Supporting a household on your own, paying for expensive childcare, and taking care of all the other expenses is not easy. According to NGO sources, Luxembourg is at the top of the list of European countries with the highest rates of child poverty. Some families do everything they can to protect their children from the financial impact, even giving up food so that the children have what they need. The situation also weighs heavily on older people. Reports by ATD Fourth World, an international organization that fights extreme poverty and promotes social inclusion, point to cases of pensioners who have to choose between paying the rent or buying medicines. Some do odd jobs, others resort to food donations, yes, even in one of the richest countries in the world. And we can't leave out young people up to the age of 24, especially the unemployed. In Luxembourg, this age group is in a kind of social limbo. Young people under the age of 25 are not entitled to certain assistance benefits, which means that if they are without work or family support, they have to fend for themselves. Number 8. Public policy. The Luxembourg government is not standing idly by. There are housing subsidies, wage supplements for low-income workers, and a well-structured health system. In addition, Luxembourg offers free public transportation, a measure that not only relieves families' pockets, but also helps to reduce urban traffic. But is this enough? NGOs and experts agree that although these initiatives help, they don't do the job. Social housing? Scarce in the face of the explosion in demand. Language integration courses? Important but slow and unable to reach all the immigrants who need them most. Social assistance? Bureaucratic, full of details and often unknown to those who really need it. The result of all this is a significant part of the population living in the shadows of the wealth indices, a reality that doesn't appear in the rankings and lists of the world's richest countries. Number 9. Future. What about the future? Well, it doesn't look promising. The cost of living in Luxembourg is only going up. The demand for housing remains high, and while some sectors profit, others work hard just to pay for the basics. The middle class, which once had a breather, is increasingly being pushed into a daily struggle for survival. Yes, there are social housing programs, but the problem is that supply doesn't keep up with demand. Waiting lists are long, and the requirements to get one of these places can be a real nightmare, especially for immigrants, the elderly and single-parent families. Meanwhile, Luxembourg's real estate market continues to boom. Each new luxury skyscraper that appears brings with it a new wave of foreign executives and investors. The result? More expensive rents and a city that is gradually becoming unaffordable for a large part of the population. It sounds absurd, but in Luxembourg, the place where the most money circulates in Europe, those who have the least have to fight even harder to have the least. Experts warn that without robust structural reform and more investment in social housing, relative poverty will continue to grow, and with it all the social problems, including the number of burglaries, which has almost tripled in the last 3 years. And if that happens, Luxembourg's image as a haven of prosperity could begin to crumble, ultimately revealing that even the richest country in the world has its cracks. And so we end another journey, this time exploring the backstage of Luxembourg, Europe's little giant which, behind the luxury and prosperity, hides a reality that few people realize. Now I want to know, what surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths behind destinations that are considered perfect, keep following Bello Mundo. We still have lots of surprising stories and secrets that nobody tells you to explore together. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.